Today, we're diving into a concept that runs like a golden thread through thousands of years of spiritual texts. It's this idea of divine deliverance, a promise of rescue that stretches all the way from ancient stories right into modern-day hope.
So let's just start with a feeling I think every single one of us knows. That feeling of being completely trapped, totally overwhelmed by a situation that just feels too big to handle, right? It's a universal human experience, and it's the perfect place to begin talking about this idea of divine help.
And right here, this is the core promise that this entire idea is built on. I mean, this verse from Psalm 34 isn't just a nice thought. It's a really bold claim. It's saying that a higher power doesn't just sit back and watch, but actually steps in. This one idea really sets the stage for everything else we're going to explore.
All right, so let's unpack what this really means. Because this isn't about some isolated one-off event. It's a central recurring theme that's literally woven through the entire biblical narrative.
So what do we actually mean when we say divine deliverance? Well, here it is in a nutshell. It's the belief that God steps in to rescue people from situations they just can't escape on their own, whether it's danger, evil, or just deep suffering. And what's so crucial to understand is that the Bible comes back to this idea over and over again. The message is pretty clear. Trust acts as a kind of shield against life's absolute worst storms. It's framed as a fundamental part of the relationship between people and God.
Okay, so how does this promise actually play out in the stories themselves? Let's take a look at some of the most famous examples. The kinds of stories that have shaped cultures for centuries.
Now, what's so fascinating here is just how different all these situations are. We're not talking about just one kind of trouble. You've got deliverance from national slavery in Egypt. Then for Daniel, a high-ranking official, it's from being thrown to lions. For David, it's from a jealous king hunting him down. And it keeps going. Peter, an apostle, is freed from a locked prison, and a group of disciples are saved from a literal storm at sea. The context changes every time, but that theme of rescue, it stays exactly the same.
Let's just zoom in on one of these for a second. Noah's Ark. It's probably the ultimate story of preservation. Think about it in these 3 steps. First, you have a world that's completely lost. Then, right in the middle of all that chaos, one family is kept safe. But here's the key, the final step. They weren't just delivered from the flood, they were delivered to a brand new beginning.
And this theme isn't random at all. It's deeply connected to specific family lines in the story. The accounts of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are absolutely foundational, showing how this promise was seen as being passed down from one generation to the next.
And wow, this really lays out the pattern, doesn't it? You see Abraham, the very first patriarch, rescued from not one, but 2 powerful kings. Then his son Isaac is saved from a devastating famine and, of course, from being sacrificed. And then his son, Jacob, is delivered from his own messy family conflicts. The message being sent is that this promise of protection just keeps getting passed down, reinforcing the whole idea.
Okay, so those are the ancient stories. But that brings us to the really big question, right? What in the world does any of this have to do with us today?
This really is the so what of it all. Are these just dusty old tales, or do people today still see this exact pattern playing out in their own lives? Well, for millions of people, the answer to that is a resounding yes.
And this isn't just some vague feeling, People are actively documenting these kinds of experiences. For instance, just one organization called God Reports has collected over 1,400 first-hand accounts from people all over the world who believe their survival or rescue was a direct result of divine intervention.
So, what do these modern stories actually look like? Let's dive into the kinds of events people are pointing to today as proof of this same timeless promise at work. For a lot of believers today, verses like this one from Isaiah, they're not just ancient poetry. They see this as a living, breathing promise of strength and direct help. It becomes the lens through which they make sense of those moments of unexpected rescue in their own lives.
When you start looking at these modern accounts, you begin to see these really clear patterns emerge. People talk about surviving disasters against all odds, or experiencing healings that doctors just can't explain, or finally breaking free from addiction. The technology and the settings are modern, sure, but the core theme of rescue is just strikingly similar to those ancient stories. And to make this really concrete, the sources point to some incredible stories. There are accounts from 9/11 survivors who, because of a last-minute change of plans or a missed train, weren't at their desks when the towers fell.
And there are also these incredibly powerful stories from people who, after struggling for years with crippling depression, describe a sudden, unexplainable shift that they credit to a spiritual intervention, allowing them to truly start fresh.
So, let's try to pull all this together. We've seen the ancient promise, and we've seen its modern echoes. So what is it that makes this idea of deliverance so powerful and so enduring?
This is where it all kind of comes together, right? Back then, the threats were floods, lions, and prisons, physical peril. Now, people are talking about recovery from illness, addiction, and disaster. For believers, it's a direct, unbroken line connecting an ancient promise to their own experiences right now.
So why is this idea stuck around for thousands of years? Well, because it does some really powerful things. It gives people hope when things look bleak. It builds strong communities through shared stories and shared faith. It can even motivate people to finally seek help because they believe rescue is actually possible. And honestly, whether you're a believer or not, it kind of forces all of us to ask bigger questions about where we find hope in a chaotic world.
And really, that's the question we want to leave you with. In a world that is so full of uncertainty, what does it really mean to hope for rescue? Whether you see it as a literal divine promise or maybe a powerful metaphor for our own resilience, this ancient idea continues to shape how we navigate our absolute deepest struggles.